person who will destroy your life won't announce themselves with obvious red flags or dramatic displays of aggression. They won't storm into your world with visible malice or recognizable warning signs that trigger your natural defenses. Instead, they'll arrive wearing the mask of reasonableness, speaking the language of concern, and offering exactly what you didn't know you needed. Society has conditioned us to fear the wrong archetypes entirely. We scan for the angry boss, the jealous friend, the obviously unstable romantic partner, while completely missing the individual who sits quietly in meetings, remembers everyone's birthdays, and somehow always ends up knowing more about your personal life than you remember. Sharing. This person operates in the spaces between conversations, in the pauses between your words, collecting psychological intelligence while appearing genuinely interested in your well-being. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that authentic danger never announces itself because announcement creates resistance, and resistance interferes with control. The most lethal personality type isn't the one that inspires fear, but the one that inspires trust, comfort, and a strange sense of being understood. These individuals have mastered what psychologists now recognize as dark empathy, the ability to accurately read emotional states not for connection but for exploitation. They represent an existential threat not just to your immediate circumstances, but to your fundamental ability to trust your own judgment about human nature. Today we'll dissect this psychological profile, not to become it, but to recognize it. Before it recognizes the vulnerabilities, you don't even know you're broadcasting. Because the most dangerous game isn't played with weapons or threats, but with perception itself. Section 1. The anatomy of calculated charm. When someone makes you feel incredibly understood very quickly, your first response should be curiosity about why that's happening, rather than gratitude that it's happening. Genuine connection builds gradually through shared experiences and mutual vulnerability, but calculated charm feels intense and immediate because it's designed to bypass your natural caution. The person giving you this experience has likely done it many times before with other people, which is why they're so good at it. Your job is to notice when the attention feels too perfect, too tailored to exactly what you need to hear in that moment. Real friends and genuine romantic interests don't immediately know exactly which emotional buttons to push to make you feel special. They learn about you slowly through normal conversation and shared experiences. When someone seems to understand your deepest needs within the first few conversations, they're either psychic or they're using techniques they've practiced on others. Start paying attention to whether this person asks as many questions as they answer, whether they share personal information at the same level you do, and whether their interest in you feels sustainable or like a performance that requires constant energy to maintain. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone who's nice to you, but to recognize when charm feels manufactured rather than authentic. Your protection begins with understanding that information flows in relationships should be roughly equal, and any significant imbalance should make you more careful about what you share. Normal people reveal things about themselves at roughly the same pace you reveal things about yourself. They forget some details about your life, just like you forget details about theirs. They ask for your advice about their problems, just like they offer advice about yours. When someone consistently remembers everything you tell them while sharing very little meaningful information about themselves, you're dealing with someone who treats personal information as a strategic resource, rather than a natural part of human bonding. This doesn't mean they're definitely dangerous, but it does mean you should slow down the pace at which you share personal details until the relationship becomes more balanced. Start tracking whether conversations feel mutual or more like interviews, where you're the subject being studied. Pay attention to whether this person seems to have other close relationships where people know them well, or whether they maintain the same mysterious, intensely interested persona with everyone. Most importantly, Notice whether you feel more understood by them than you understand them, because that imbalance is often the first sign that someone is deliberately managing their image while collecting intelligence about you. The most important thing to understand about patient manipulators is that their patience is actually your opportunity to gather information about their true character before you become too invested in the relationship. They take their time building influence because they believe slow manipulation is more effective than quick manipulation. But this extended timeline gives you months or even years to observe inconsistencies between their words and actions. Notice how they treat other people when they think you're not watching, and see whether their personality remains consistent across different situations and social groups. Use this time to your advantage by paying attention to small details that reveal character. Do they speak differently about people when those people aren't around? Do they have long-term friendships with people who know them well? Or do most of their relationships seem fairly new and superficial? Do they handle conflict, stress, and disappointment in ways that match the personality they show you during good times? Most importantly, do other people in their life seem genuinely happy and empowered, or do they seem anxious, confused, or diminished? Patient manipulators often leave a trail of damaged relationships behind them, but they're skilled at explaining away these failures in ways that make them seem like the victim or the reasonable party. Your job is to look past their explanations and notice the patterns in how their relationships tend to end, and how the people who used to be close to them talk about the experience now. But recognizing calculated charm is only useful if you know how to protect yourself once you've identified it, because these individuals don't simply give up when their initial approach doesn't work. Section 2. The invisible manipulation system. The moment you notice someone consistently steering conversations toward topics that make you emotionally reactive, you need to start controlling what information you're giving them access to. These individuals are experts at identifying your psychological triggers because they pay attention to the subtle changes in your voice, posture, and energy when certain subjects come up. They'll bring up your ex-partner's name just to see how you react, mention financial stress when you seem worried about money, or ask about family relationships when you're already feeling vulnerable. Your defense is recognizing these probes for what they are and giving neutral, unrevealing responses instead of the emotional reactions they're fishing for. When someone asks about a sensitive topic, you can acknowledge the question without providing the psychological data they're really after. Instead of explaining why your last relationship ended badly, you can simply say it didn't work out and change the subject. Instead of detailing your financial worries, you can mention that everyone has money concerns sometimes and move to a different topic. The goal is training yourself to recognize when questions are designed to map your emotional landscape rather than build genuine connection. Normal friends ask about sensitive topics because they care about you and want to help. Manipulators ask about sensitive topics because they want to understand how to influence your emotional state when it serves their purposes. Learning to tell the difference between these motivations will protect you from giving away information that can be used against you later. Your most powerful defense against invisible manipulation is creating situations where you can observe this person's true character when they don't know you're paying attention. Manipulators are skilled at maintaining their preferred image during direct interactions with you, but they often reveal their real nature in how they treat other people, especially those who can't offer them anything valuable. Pay attention to how they speak about former friends, ex-partners, or colleagues when those people aren't around. Notice whether they show genuine empathy when others are struggling, or whether their concern seems performative and short-lived. Watch how they handle situations where they don't get what they want, where someone disagrees with them, or where they face legitimate criticism. Most importantly, Observe whether the people in their life seem genuinely happy and empowered, or whether there's a pattern of relationships that end badly with the other person being blamed for the problems. You can also test their character by sharing small pieces of false information about yourself and seeing what happens to that information over time. Tell them you're considering a decision you're not actually planning to make. Mention a fictional concern you're supposedly dealing with, or share a made-up detail about your past and track whether that information gets shared with others or used against you later. Genuine friends keep your confidences private and don't use your vulnerabilities as leverage in future conversations. Manipulators treat your personal information as strategic resources that can be deployed whenever it serves their purposes. But even the most sophisticated manipulation system has vulnerabilities, and recognizing these patterns before they fully deploy is your only real protection. Section 3. Protection and recognition. The earliest warning signs appear during what they call their testing phase, when they're still figuring out how much access you'll give them to your psychology and your life. Pay attention to the questions. That feels slightly too personal for the level of relationship you actually have with this person. Notice when someone remembers details you don't recall sharing, brings up topics that seem designed to trigger emotional reactions, or pushes just a little too hard for information about your fears, dreams, or past traumas. Watch for the subtle boundary violations disguised as care or curiosity, like showing up uninvited, contacting you through channels you didn't provide, or inserting themselves into situations where they weren't included. These individuals are masters at making boundary testing feel natural, but there's always something slightly off about the timing, intensity, or appropriateness of their interest. They'll ask about your relationship problems after you've mentioned having a difficult week, probe about your financial situation when you seem stressed about money, or want to know about your family dynamics right after you've had a conflict with relatives. The key is recognizing that while normal people occasionally ask personal questions out of genuine concern, these individuals ask personal questions with a consistency and precision that suggests they're following some kind of invisible script. Your instincts will often pick up on this pattern before your conscious mind does, so trust that feeling of unease when someone's interest in your personal life feels more like an interview than a conversation, even when they're skilled at making their questions seem spontaneous and caring. Once you've identified a potentially dangerous personality in your life, your protection strategy must operate like a counterintelligence operation where you appear cooperative while actually revealing nothing useful and gathering information about their true intentions. Start implementing an information diet immediately by sharing only surface-level details about your life while keeping anything meaningful completely private. When they ask about your weekend plans, mention mundane activities rather than anything that reveals your real priorities, relationships, or vulnerabilities. When they want to know about your work situation, stick to basic facts without sharing your actual feelings, concerns, or ambitions. Meanwhile, begin feeding them carefully crafted false information to test their trustworthiness and track how information moves through their network. Tell them you're considering a major decision you're not actually planning to make. Mention a fictional problem you're supposedly dealing with, or share a fake piece of personal history and see what happens to that information. Pay attention to who else starts asking about topics you only discussed with them, which of your other relationships suddenly become more complicated, or how quickly your fake information gets back to you through other sources. Map their social connections by observing who they mention frequently, who they seem to have unusual influence over, and which people in your shared circles start behaving differently after spending time with them. This isn't about becoming paranoid or treating every social interaction like a battle, but rather about protecting yourself from someone who has already demonstrated they view relationships as strategic opportunities rather than genuine human connections. The goal is to maintain a pleasant surface relationship while ensuring they never gain enough real information or emotional leverage to cause serious damage to your life, your other relationships, or your sense of reality. In a world where most people are desperate to be understood, the person who remains strategically unknowable holds a power that even they may not fully comprehend.